Turnkey with Morgan Francis, sponsored by Integrity Roofing.
Welcome into Turnkey on Queen City News Plus, your go-to show for everything real estate in the Carolinas. We talk about the latest market trends, do's and don'ts of the industry, and provide expert advice on navigating this dynamic landscape that we call home. I am your host, Morgan Francis, and I am really excited about today's show because we have a self-proclaimed, slightly nerdy friend who delivers helpful money advice with a healthy dose of snark. Everybody, welcome in George Camel with Dave Ramsey, Ramsey Solutions. George.
What an intro. Honored to be here, Morgan. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, I can't take credit for that intro because I actually took it from your profile on Ramsey Solutions.
Our team worked hard on that one.
Yeah, great. Well, I would love to hear, before we get into all the expert advice aspect of our show, just getting to know you. I did a little bit of healthy research on you, and you started out as an intern with Dave Ramsey, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was in the marketing and social media team back in 2013, and I was that guy out of college with a bunch of student loans, a bunch of credit cards, just hoping to get a salaried position one day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the goal. And so I got this internship at Dave Ramsey's company, and I just stuck around. And what that led me into was following the Ramsey plan, following the baby steps, getting out of that consumer debt. And within a decade, I went from broke, negative net worth to baby steps millionaire in 10 years. And so now I'm proclaiming to all of the Gen Zers, millennials, even the Gen Xers and boomers, there's financial hope for you if you can still fog up a mirror, and the average George can do it. So can you.
So you became, your title is like a financial expert at Ramsey Solutions. How did you go from someone who wanted to make a difference in your life to that person who can offer financial advice to other people?
Well, you know, I think experience really helps. When you've been there, it's easier to show someone the way out. And so I climbed out of that $40,000 in debt, and I started realizing how many money traps I had fallen for. And so, like you said, I'm kind of the nerdy friend who does the research. And so I'm always just, keeping up to date on what the consumer habits are and the trends and the new products that are out there. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized there's like this financial matrix that exists to keep you broke. All they want to do is extrapolate more of your money. And so you have to be very proactive to fight against that, to keep more of your hard-earned money, let alone build wealth. And so that's what I want to help people do, is save more, spend less, and avoid all these consumer traps out there so that we can build wealth and live our dream life.
What do you feel like was your biggest trap, you personally, when you were starting all this?
Well, there's a trap that's laid out that's all interconnected. And it starts with this American dream of getting an education and going to school. And as you do that, you take out monopoly money from Sally Mae that you think, well, one day maybe I will have to pay this back. Maybe it'll get forgiven. And so that was the biggest trap I fell for personally, was $36,000 in student loans. And then along the way, what happens? Well, you turn 18 and they go, well, you got to have a credit card because you got to build your credit score. And so then I start playing that game, and I have multiple credit cards I'm juggling, and I'm trying to get the score up, but none of it makes sense. And so I find myself $40,000 in consumer debt, wondering, I guess this is the American dream, ? And I'm exhausted, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm broke. And so that's when I went, there's got to be another way. And Ramsey Solutions intersected my life, thankfully, in my early 20s. And I went, I'll try this guy's plan. He says it works. He's very convincing. Millions of people have done it. What do I have to lose? And so I tried it. And it worked. There's nothing fancy. It wasn't like I bought the course and all of a sudden I was wealthy. It wasn't get rich quick. It was get rich slow. It was sacrifice. It was side hustles. It was living on less than I make. And so all of that got me out of the debt, got me an emergency fund in my own bank account, and then allowed me to invest for the future and eventually pay off my house early in my early 30s.
We have some video up right now showing you kind of going to the streets and talking to people. And it really amazes me as well how many people just answer your questions about really personal financial, their financial situation. They say how much debt they're in and what kind of debt that is. Are you always impressed or shocked, I guess, at how much information people are willing to give you?
Oh, absolutely. Because you catch me in the street, I'm not going to divulge all this personal information, but there's been kind of this, transparency trend happening where people are okay talking about all this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is sad because they're sort of hopeless. And so they don't mind sharing because they're like, well, I got nothing to lose. I'm never going to get out of this debt. Who cares? And so that's what I found as I go downtown across the country. We did one in Chicago. We've done Vegas, Nashville, of course, our hometown here. And what's shocking is that people, number one, don't have clarity. They don't even know how much debt they actually have. They don't even consider their debt to be debt. I say, do you have any debt? They go, no. I said, well, do you have a car payment? They go, yeah, well, of course I have a car payment, but I don't have debt. Well, do you have credit card bills? And they go, yeah, I have a balance that I'm working on paying off. And I go, what do you think debt is? It's owing anything to anyone for any reason. And so that's a shocking part on top of the, I guess, financial nihilism of just, who cares? I'm never going to pay it off. Maybe one day I'll die with the debt or the government will forgive it. And that's kind of the status quo, sadly, in America today. It's not that they're not stressed about it. They've just given up hope, which to me is even more sad.
And I think a lot of times too, if it's so stressful, maybe it's tomorrow's problem. We'll deal with that tomorrow. We don't want to deal with that today. I want to get into some of the actual financial advice portion of this show. Are you up for giving some budgeting advice free on the house?
Absolutely.
All right.
This one's free for you.
All right. Sounds good. We don't have to pay for that one, but we have to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, we'll dive into all of that in just a bit. More Turnkey after this. What are some of the most common questions that you get from people who call into your show?
One of the most common questions we get on the Ramsey show is people who are just confused as to how to go about fixing their mess. And what I found is like money is a symptom, but there's usually about 7 layers deeper than that. And it's relational and there's boundary issues and they co-signed a loan for the girlfriend and they already moved in with them and they bought a house together. And so you're sitting here trying to unravel all the pieces of this mess within, a 5-minute call. And the call at face value was, how do I pay off my debt? And so we always tell people to just get clarity, make a budget, list out what your income is going to be next month, list out what all of your expenses are. And that way the boogeyman is no longer under the bed. We at least know what we're facing because the unknowns are a lot scarier than the facts.
Do you feel like there are a lot of unknowns out there that people are paying for and they don't even realize it? As I'm saying this, like subscriptions come to my mind.
Oh, 100%. If you ask someone, how many subscriptions do you have? They're probably off by about half. They go, I have maybe 5. And if I went through their bank statement, I could count 10 at least. And so that's one area we don't have clarity on. The other one is debt. I ask people, hey, how much debt do you have? What's the balance of that loan? What's the interest rate? What's the repayment plan? And they just simply don't know. And so I tell people, hey, here's the easiest way to do that. Go to annualcreditreport.com. You can pull all 3 credit bureau reports for free from that website. Don't ever pay for it. And that'll give you a clear picture. They'll tell you exactly who you owe money to, how much, all of the information you need to then, okay, now I know I'm $97,494 in debt. Versus, I think it's 80 or 90. We need clarity if we're going to get out of this mess.
Where does someone, so that's a good start, but how does someone figure out a budget that works for them and really start to, save some money for eventually the American dream, which is owning a home?
Well, one of the biggest fallacies I hear with budgeting is they go, I don't make enough to budget, so I don't make enough money. Or, well, budgets are for broke people, or they're for accountants and nerdy people, and therefore it's not for me, or it's too restrictive. I don't need someone telling me how I can spend my money. And what I tell people is budgeting is actually freedom. It's permission to spend. You're the boss of the budget. And if you want to put some fun money in there, go put it in. But the key is we have to be intentional about what happens to our money. Otherwise, it's going to disappear. And so that's the power of the budget. And so we tell people, whether or not you think you have enough at the end of the month or not, it's irrelevant. The budget is going to at least give you clarity to know, am I $500 in the hole every month? Because that looks awfully like going $6,000 into debt on that credit card over the course of 1 year. Or maybe you find out, wow, we make plenty of money. We make $10,000 a month. Where is it all going? And the budget also helps you with that, especially using our Every Dollar budgeting app where you can track transactions. It'll connect to your bank accounts and give you that very clear picture very quickly.
You have so many articles available that you write. A lot of them are just budgeting tips, money management tips to take control of your finances. Tell me a little bit more about that and how someone can feel more confident in their finances.
Well, I like to do a simple math equation that creates margin. That's breathing room in your budget. So instead of going, where did all the money go? You say, wow, I have $700 extra to throw at my next financial goal. And the key to getting margin is to either spend less or make more. ideally both. If we can increase the income and decrease the expenses, we create an even bigger gap of that margin that we can then use at our disposal. There's certain things that are just a waste of money or that we could do better on. And, maybe it's travel or entertainment or eating out or even groceries and meal prep. So there's all kinds of tips on that side. And then you've got the make more side. And I have a great side hustle quiz at georgekamel.com/side hustle to help people figure out what side hustle is right for me. Everybody wants to make more money, but it may not work based on their time, their talents, their skills, their area that they're in.
There are so many people out there who are doing side hustles. We even have a show here at Queen City News called Side Hustles, where we talk with people about some of the things that they do to make some extra money on the side. So it's become a very normal thing to have something that you do on the side to make a little bit of extra cash. But, it didn't used to always be like this. It used to be one salary was enough to support an entire family. So I know that Dave Ramsey is big on debt-free, but what would you say to the younger generation or young families that say that's just not possible in today's housing market, but overall market with the inflation?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge, is it does take more to just kind of have a base level of lifestyle. Now, there's survival. We're not talking about like poverty here. But when you look at most people's incomes, they go, yeah, we make 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, $90,000 a year, if not six figures and more. And if you listen to the Ramsey show for any amount of time, you'll realize that making more doesn't solve your problems. We get plenty of people who make 150, 200, 300,
still paycheck to paycheck,
who are still broke, living paycheck to paycheck. And those people are actually harder to convince. I can convince someone making $35,000 to sacrifice and get out of debt. But when your lifestyle is so inflated because you make a lot of money, that's a much harder thing to cut down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a huge problem, is just, we need dual income households in a lot of areas based on your lifestyle. And childcare is no joke. If you're paying $2,000 a month out of your $4,000, and that doesn't even cover rent or your mortgage, things are going to be tight for a little while. Do we want to still live here? Do we need to move to a cheaper cost of living area that we can actually survive in and get ahead instead of living in the big city where we have a really cool life, but we can't afford it?
Mm-hmm. It's hard to say no. I think that's a lot of times, especially in a city like Charlotte where there's so much going on. It's hard to be the one to say, I'm going to stay home on a Saturday night because I want to save for that house, or I want to save to try to, pay off that credit card bill. And you mentioned this, childcare. There are more and more families that are faced with that decision of does one of us work and the other stays home, as you mentioned, because childcare is so expensive. So there are a lot of tough conversations, and it takes time, right? Sitting down at the dinner table, with either your computer open or a piece of paper if you do it by hand, and really crunching those numbers, right?
Yeah. And housing is a big thing. And you mentioned that. That's kind of at the crux of this. It's the, biggest fixed expense for most people. And for people who want to be homeowners, it's just flat out depressing. When you look at the median home price now above $400,000, the interest rates they're starting to come down, but it's not enough to make a huge dent in the monthly mortgage payment. And so they're really having to make some hard decisions and go, well, I guess we need to get a condo or a townhome a little further out instead of living where we want to live in a single family home. So these are the decisions people have to make. And then even saving up a down payment feels overwhelming to go, how am I going to save up $50,000 or $100,000 to put down on this very expensive home? And so those are all problems I'm trying to help people with. And it all starts with that income. How do we get that income up enough to get rid of the debt, get an emergency fund, save up the down payment, build wealth for the future? And the good news is that's in your control. There's a lot that isn't in your control. We can't control the inflation numbers. We can't control what happens in the White House. But I can control my habits, my skill set, my ability to go get a better job or work an extra job for a season in order to make more.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the housing aspect, because that's kind of the main focus of our show, Turnkey, which has to do with housing. And a big fan of our show is meteorologist Andrew Brightman. He is joining us for our show, and he's got a lot of questions for you. He's going to ask them right when we come back after this quick commercial break. Welcome back to Turnkey on Queen City News Plus. We've been talking with George Kamel, with Dave Ramsey, Ramsey Solutions, a personality for the show. This has been just so informative, George, and we love having you on. Another big fan of Ramsey Solutions, as well as Turnkey, is meteorologist Andrew Brightman. Andrew, you have been taking notes over there during the show. What have you been typing?
I've been typing up questions. I want to be prepared. I feel like I'm Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas, going from Halloween Town into Christmas Town, coming into Turnkey.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm so excited to be
Great
here.
analogy.
Thank you.
So George always fields a lot of questions on the show and has to think of quick answers on the spot, crunching numbers and everything. We're not going to get too much. We're not going to get into like personal finances here, but I would love to hear what your questions are for George.
He's got a little bit of the facial hair, some wisdom. So that's what I'm hoping from George here coming up over the next few.
From the beard. doesn't it?
Yes, lots of wisdom. I can't grow facial hair yet. Anyway, so the first question I got for you, George, something I've been seeing a lot here in terms of people buying houses is that usually it's sold. Obviously, I know you guys preach if you can't pay all cash, but normally it's 20% down. A lot of people have been putting down less than 20% because houses have become so expensive. Is there ever a time where you would recommend that you think that's a good decision, or if you can't put down at least the 20%, it's better off, hey, just trying to save more money because you have to do the PMI, you're going to have a higher mortgage anyway. Is there ever a time where putting less than that, at least normal 20% is a good idea?
Yeah, I mean, we live in reality with the rest of America, and so we understand 20% on $450,000 is insurmountable for a lot of people for their first time buying a home. So we tell people, if you're a first-time home buyer, 5 to 10% down is okay. Now, like you mentioned, 20% is just a sweet spot because you can avoid private mortgage insurance, which is just a few extra $100 that goes to the lender to protect them because you're a risky borrower in their eyes. And so 20% is ideal, but 5 to 10% down is A-okay. The key thing is you want that mortgage payment to end up being 25% or less of your after-tax monthly income. So let's say you make $6,000, you want to aim for a mortgage that's about $1,500. And again, it's not legalistic. This is just a parameter because what we find on the Ramsey show is people call in and they say, hey, we don't have any money to throw at these financial goals to get out of debt. And I go, well, what's your mortgage? They go, well, it's $2,300 a month. And I go, well, how much do you make? $4,000 a month. I'm going, well, the math is not mathing here. You can't put food on the table if your mortgage is 50, 60% of your take-home pay. And so we're conservative for a reason. We want you to have this home be a blessing, not a burden.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. And this is actually kind of a little bit something you were mentioning earlier. You said you paid off your house in your early 30s here. So you really crushed it, paid it down very quickly. Now, this is a little bit in the weeds here, but, basically the S&P 500 has gained 7% after inflation in the aggregate over the past, couple of generations. I would assume your interest rate on your house was a little bit less than that. So how did you decide to maybe forego investing in retirement versus trying to pay down your house a little bit quicker? How did you kind of balance those two of getting out of debt, but also maybe leaving investing gains on the table by just not buying mutual funds or index funds with that?
That's such a great question. And there's a real hot debate right now on X because someone posted, hey, I paid off my mortgage even though I had a low interest rate and I'm a financial nerd. Somebody posted that, it blew up, and so it started this whole discussion. And I love it because here's what we're talking about. It's a bunch of nerds nerding out about hypotheticals, right? We don't know what the market's going to do. If I had a crystal ball, I would have invested in Uber and Bitcoin 10 years ago. So here's what we do know. When I remove my biggest fixed expense, it's going to increase my peace. It's going to increase my flexibility, increase my options. So when there's a job loss in the family, we're not going to be as stressed out if we don't have a mortgage. My wife decided, you know what, I want to stay home after a 9-year career at Ramsey. And she was able to do that because we didn't have a mortgage. It wasn't a financial decision. It was a personal decision. And that's exactly what happens with this early mortgage payoff. You can look at the spreads all day of what we could have made.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hypotheticals, but paying down your mortgage, there's a fixed return there, and it increases your peace, and you can't represent that on paper. And that's what I found from people who did it. Nobody regrets paying off their house early, and they say, man, it is so much more than math and arbitrage and spreads. It is increasing my peace of mind, and that was 100% worth it, even though it wasn't financially optimal.
I think there are a lot of people. I think there are a lot of people who are thinking about that right now, especially the ones who have anywhere from 2.5% to 3.5% interest rate on their home, which is like a lot of people right now, because a lot of them are house trapped for one. But I think they do balance. Okay, I can probably make more in the market, so maybe I should do that instead of paying off the house. But as you said, there's no crystal ball. Things can happen when you're investing your money.
Well, and a good point to that is I was investing the whole time. I did not stop investing.
Right.
I invested 15% of our household income every single paycheck while paying off the house early, sitting extra money was then going to that. So I didn't forego investing. Now, I could have invested more, but we say in the baby steps, once you're at baby step 7, that's when you have a paid-for house, no debt. Then you can maximize investing. You can invest way more than 15%, and that's what having no mortgage payment has allowed me to do. And a lot of people forget, oh, yeah, I just freed up $2,000 that was going to the lender that I can now invest with. I can give more. I can spend more. And so that really has allowed us to save up for any goal much easier when you free up that biggest fixed expense.
Well, that compounds too, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely. And kind of my next question is here, for people, there's so much more that goes into getting a house in terms of what you're paying for besides just the down payment, the closing costs, the mortgage. Specifically, you talk about, like, I live in an apartment. When something goes wrong, I just call up my, the apartment complex. They come and fix it for me. I don't have to pay for it. But when you own a home, you have to pay for it. I think a question for me is, so many people don't budget for that in terms of housing repairs. So one thing I saw, online on X, the takes online is maybe 1% of the value of the home per year should save for housing repairs. What is your kind of take of how much people should put aside? So maybe one day you have to get a new roof, one day you have to get a new HVAC system. What kind of money should you really put aside so you don't go into debt over that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think 1% is a decent baseline, and it's so dependent. Do you live in a 1970s fixer-upper, or is it a brand new build that's likely not going to need a roof for 20 years? And so it's wise to look every year and go, hey, how's the HVAC system doing? Let's get a check on that. How's the roof looking? Let's get a check on that. And having a sinking fund set aside, so this is where you just set aside, let's say it's $300 a month that you set aside in a savings account. So at the end of the year, you have $3,600 saved just for maintenance and repairs. And the problem is when people lump this into one big savings account, it becomes the vacation fund. It kind of becomes the emergency fund. Is the roof an emergency? If we've known that it needs repair, that's kind of the problem with
has some commingling. Yeah.
So I like to just separate it out in a separate little savings account and just home maintenance and repairs. And if you need to use it, you don't have to feel bad about it. You didn't rob from Peter to pay Paul. You already had that set aside. So that's being proactive with your money and knowing that home ownership is going to cost you. You got to set aside money. If you pay off your mortgage, you have to pay the property taxes on your own. You have to make sure the homeowner's insurance is paid. And so there is a lot of other costs and things to think about when it comes to home ownership. And I miss the days when I could just call the landlord and be like, hey, man, the toilet's broken. That sounds like your problem.
I once called maintenance for a cockroach.
Sometimes being a rent slave is a good thing. But
I didn't want to deal with it.
Did they get rid of the cockroach?
They did. They were really nice. I had it trapped, so I did need a little bit of help because those things are fast.
When there's one cockroach, there's many. That's the worrisome part.
No, our spiders is the issue at our place.
Oh God.
They're little ones. My wife hates spiders, though. Anyway,
the little ones scare me more. They're not. It doesn't matter. They can be just as dangerous.
Yeah,
it's true. So my last question. This is the two-parter. This is kind of like a 50,000-foot kind of question. As you were kind of talking about it, how does it become more and more expensive? In the 1950s, it was 2x the average household income was the cost of a house. In the 70s, it was 3.5. The 90s, it was 4. Now we're roughly around 5 times the household income is the median income versus the median house. What do you think is really driving that? Because that's something that I've been trying to figure out. What has really changed in America in terms of owning a home and why it feels so much farther away for the average American over the past 50 years? And then the second part is, do you think anything's ever going to change with the dynamic, or is that sort of multiple just going to keep getting bigger and bigger?
Man, I wish I had a crystal ball for that one to go, well, I think the next 3 years, home ownership will be affordable for many Americans. I don't. All I know is this. You're right. And in the math, it's harder. And so when Gen Z and millennials are telling their parents, here's why I can't afford a home, here's why I need to keep renting, and the parents just yell at them and say, just buy a house. When I was your age, and they're not living in the same reality that these younger people are. And so it is harder mathematically, but it's not impossible. It's just going to look different. A lot of young people, they want the house that their parents have now, not realizing that it took them 30 years to get there. And the houses that they did buy back in the day are not houses that, millennials and Gen Z would want to live in today. We have a higher expectation of the house that we live in, a higher standard, thanks to social media and HGTV, and we want to switch out the countertops, and the walls need to come down. I want an open floor plan.
And I can do it all myself. HGTV says I can.
Oh my goodness. Good luck with that. Yeah, that turns into a construction for 9 years.
Yeah.
So that's really the crux of it, is our standards have increased of what we demand out of a home. We want bigger homes. We don't want to live in the 1,200 square foot home or grandma and grandpa had. We want it to be nicer. We want it to be in a nicer area that's walkable to the best coffee shops. And so these are luxuries that we simply can't afford in most areas. And so here's what that means. You're going to have to sacrifice. It's going to take longer. It's going to take more income. And what we'll begin to see is more long-term renters and fewer people that are able to jump into home ownership unless it's an inherited home from their boomer parents. And so that's the sad reality of it, unless you make some sweeping changes. And you do things like I did, which is at an early age decide, I want to get out of that fast so that I can build wealth, so that I can get into a home. And that's going to take losing, some travel and entertainment and subscriptions and working to get that next promotion or get increase in pay at that next career move. And so that's difficult. It's easier said than done to go from $40,000 to $80,000, but you just can't buy a home making $34,000 in today's real estate market. So I don't think home prices will go down. I just think we'll see more develop, and it'll get further and further out of the rings of the metro areas, and that'll become the places people start to flock to just to get their foot in the door.
I think it's interesting. One thing that we are seeing is that homes are becoming smaller because the builders are still trying to sell homes at an attractive price with materials that are more expensive. So the square footage in homes are decreasing, but the price per square foot is increasing. But the one thing we have that I think some of our parents probably didn't have is single-digit interest rates. Getting an interest rate in double digits is definitely a tough pill to
I
swallow.
think my parents, their first house that they got in the late 80s, it was like 12 or 13%.
Yeah. So
Yeah, right there, the late 70s, early 80s, we saw that spike to like 18%. Now, all prices were, $60,000, $70,000. So
right.
people have that in a car payment now, which is scary.
Mhm.
But, it still was easier due to the lower price point versus an 8% on a $450,000 home. That's going to sting when you look at that monthly mortgage.
Mhm.
So the math of it is really tough, but I want to encourage people. It's possible. It's just going to look different and take longer.
Well, I really wish we had more time. I have so many more questions. It just means I guess we'll have to have George back
Yeah.
on the show again.
It would be an honor.
Well,
It's so fun. I have a lot of questions for Andrew, too, about cumulus clouds. So
Please.
ooh,
I will
Anytime.
might have to be an offline discussion. But George, thank you so much. Andrew, you came prepared, man. I appreciate it.
You let me. I want to make you proud, Morgan.
Thank you guys.
Whoever has a sick day, Andrew's going to fill in.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. That's your shot. Well, thank you, George. Thank you, Andrew. And to everyone else out there, thank you so much for watching Turnkey on Queen City News Plus. We'll see you next time.
Queen City News Plus. Just search Queen City News on your smart TV's app store.